get them to a point where we could actually get them funded, right? That's the objective of the incubator accelerator. We actually left in 2018 to start the fund, Blue Bear Ventures, and we invested in a lot of companies that we actually incubated and helped. Um, Having said that, I would love to just open it up to questions and really, let you guys ask. I know there was a question about funding and when's the right time for funding, at the stage. We could talk about technology. I've worked at four different startups as well, and I've done a lot of different roles. Two of them actually have gone through the IPO process as well. So I understand the entrepreneurship side, but past 15 years more been venture capital. So I'll stop right there and just open it up to questions and we can go from there.
This is a very friendly group, so anybody should not nobody should worry about like what the speakers would think. Everybody is here to learn. Maybe, yeah. For her, as how is the funding market right now for a seed and Series A fundings? Maybe for her, can I just hold off on that question? Probably I'll prompt you, Deepak, to probably I'll push you into certain directions so that we cover the basics. So a lot of the folks here might not have interacted with the venture capitalist. So let's start there. What is venture capital? What is its role in helping build deep tech companies? Because most of the folks in the call here are in the deep tech space, and maybe have one or two examples of a story of how you have helped when you invested to help grow those companies. And then I think the questions will start rolling in.
Sure. And Lily, I think you had a question about the funding, how much you raised. So this kind of ties into these stories. So a lot of people in terms of postdocs and PhDs really are not looking to start a company. And, traditionally at Berkeley, it's more about, okay, once I finish my postdoc, can I go to another university to open my lab and actually get research grant money and, whatever we're working on. The inclination has really been changing in the past 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, where these scientist CEOs are thinking about, okay, what do I need to do if I do have an idea or whatever I'm working on research, could that be into an idea? That's the first question. A business idea, by the way, can this somehow be something where I could go sell this product, build this product, whatever it is, right? So the initial thought processes, and if you guys haven't Googled a place called Berkeley Activate, please do that because that's something people are still using. That's a place where you could be a postdoc PhD, with a thought of an idea. And Berkeley Activate does a great job of actually trying to figure out if this idea could be a business model. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's great because it's part of Cyclotron Road. So Cyclotron Road, if you've heard these acronyms, maybe Naresh, I should go back. Maybe there's a website that everyone should know about. It's called begin.berkeley.edu. This is an entrepreneurship website for Berkeley in which every single resource you can think about entrepreneurship is listed here. All right. And thank you for sharing the website. So if you go through the directory on the bottom, you can look at all the incubators, accelerators, funding, you name it, ideas. Where do you go to actually investigate your product into a startup idea, right? And we could really explore the Berkeley ecosystem because if you're bio, you would be going in a different direction compared to climate tech, which you'll probably go to Berk, which is Berkeley. Well, you can put the website for Berk as well. So it really depends on which area you're focused on and where you can go. But at the end of the day, the first thing you really have to investigate is this idea something that I should explore as a business position? That's the first thing you need to go through. Second thing, once you think, okay, this is something that I need help, I need to figure out how to create a pitch deck. And this is the story, Naresh, you were asking about. You know, a lot of the scientists that we work on, they're like, I have no idea about business or entrepreneurship. I just know my science. How do I actually create a pitch and a pitch deck? What does metrics mean? What does milestones mean? Finally, do I need a team? Who should be on my team, right? Should I find somebody from business school? Should I find somebody from my lab? How do I create that strong team, right? These are all questions you really have to think about once you know your research could be in some kind of business, right? So once you have an idea for a a idea that can be a business, then it's like the next thing is the team. Who should be on my team and how should I build it, right? After that, we have to really figure out what incubator accelerators can really help you guys to create that story, to create the pitch, to figure out what we call metrics and milestones. And what that means is basically the ideas could be so many, a dime a dozen of ideas. But and Charlie will really go into that later. But you know, something that people that really measure on is can you execute? If you tell me you're going to do something in 2 months, can you do it? And that's what angel investors and VCs are looking for. So coming back to the definition of angel investors and VC, these are people with the money that will take percentage of a company to see if we can make returns on the company. And usually in a startup ecosystem or angel, they want returns of 10 times. So if I give you $1, I would love to get $10 back or $15 back, right? So your idea has to be such that you're exciting these investors in a way that they can see, oh wow, it's a cure for, I mean, we could talk about gene editing, we could talk about CRISPR technology, whatever it is, it's some kind of a breakthrough technology where they could see some kind of return on their investment, right? Now, the way that you're going to work with a lot of these investors, it is a dating process in which you're building a relationship trust because this investor will eventually give you money, whether it's $100,000, $500,000, $1 million. And we can talk about how much you raise in a minute, but it's like, how do I build the trust that my research is good, A, and B, I can really execute. I can actually build something to a point that in 3 months I'll have data, whether it's mice data or something like that, or I can go out and get SBIR grants. You know, there's ways to get money outside of venture that you can actually go and prove your execution, prove that you can build something. All right, I'll stop right there. Yeah, I know there might be a question.
So I have a question. So when do you decide, or how do you decide like angel investor money versus SBIR or STTR type of grant? Or are there other seed fundings that we're not thinking of?
So there are a lot more seed funding, and when you go to that website begin.berkeley.edu, you will see other types of funding. But I always tell my students that first thing you should go after money that has no equity involved, so like SBIR grant, any kind of grant money that you can get. That's your first, I guess, segue into raising money. And I know it's a painful process to get the grant money and it takes time, but that's a pure way of really building your execution and building some kind of a runway for your idea and company. That's really important. Because once you start pitching to angels and people who are going to give you money, it's always like every month you have to provide updates you want to do, and it's a lot more constraints, right?
And what are they giving money for? What are they expecting in return? So maybe you can touch on that subject, angels, VCs.
Yeah, so angel investors, every time you raise money, and Lily, this is back to your question, maybe it's only for 18 months. What do you expect to do in 18 to 24 months in money? So people ask me, how much money should I raise? Should I ask for $100,000, $500,000, $1 million? And it really depends on how many people you want to hire or you need, Maybe you want to pay yourself salary. On top of that, you want to figure out, okay, what are the milestones you want to hit in 18 months? So, the angel investor or anybody is really trying to see for your next fundraising, what are you going to achieve to convince the new fundraising people, the venture capitalists, that, hey, you told me 18 months ago you're going to do X, Y, and Z. You did it, right, in 18 months. Now I need more money so I could do it again in the 18 to 24 months. And those letters that you guys might have heard, seed, Series A, Series B, C, that just increment, right? Seed is the initial capital, A, B. As the letters go higher, more money comes into a company.
Put a couple of questions in the chat. One of them was, what is the key difference between the companies that you choose to invest in versus the ones that you don't?
Okay, so market is the number one thing that we want to really look at. How big is the market, right? Second thing that I personally look at is how strong is the team? Can the team execute, right? So if the team at your stage can execute, because once they're at Charlie's stage, and Charlie, you could probably chime in, you raised a lot more money in terms of $100 million. But when you were starting, it's really based on, hey, is this idea and the team really worth it? And when I say idea, I meant the market, right? How big is that market size? Would it really make a dent? And can this team do it? So those are the two things. And then some people go into the nuances, Lily, and they'll actually go through and say, how much cash do I really need for 4 years or 5 years or 10 years to get this? Do I have to go through FDA? Do I need a PMA? Do I need a 510K for medical device companies? Do I need to get pharma involved? How much money? So, there could be a longer strategy, a longer role in that. But the initial 18 months, what are you trying to achieve with the capital I'm going to give you?
Maybe I can tag another question to Lily's question. Like when you talk about team, Deepak, at the stage we are talking about, these are like so early, trying to translate some research. Like what exactly are things that worked or strong points that, if there's a framework that a team should have, or you for your own brain? How do you decide if this team will work or this team won't?
We actually had to date them for about 6 months to 12 months, and that's what Citrus Foundry did a great job, because a lot of the times, and you all are in research, you all understand this, egos get involved, and it's my research, whether it's a professor or the postdoc and stuff. So it's like, how do we really get through the nuances? What we're looking for at the end of the day, and I think, Alice, this might be to your question or whatever, it's something called coachable CEOs. How do we really find people who are coachable, scientists who are coachable enough to say, hey, I know my research, I don't know entrepreneurship, but if you're telling me I need to do this, I'm willing to pivot. So when you're trying to find investors, whether they're angel investors or VCs, two things you all should be doing, because there's a lot of dumb money out there, but two things you need to do. One is, if they have invested in other companies, talk to the other founders, find out, do a reference check on them. How have they helped, right? Because the biggest thing at early stage and the stage you guys are at is finding the right investors. And for us, it's our reputation. We need to have a strong reputation. The second thing is, will they help me along the way? How much they help? It's not just the money. Do they find me talent? Do they find me resources? If I'm looking for lab space, if I'm looking for anything else, how will they really help me with this money, right? So those are the two things that you really have to focus on.
You bring up a very good point, Deepak, about how we get to watch these founders for 6 months at Citrus Foundry. I heard this from Doug Crawford at, he used to be at QB3 and Mission Bio now. They get to watch you guys closely. And I think that's a nice way for the founders to interact with the investors to see how helpful they are. I don't think, founders are really selective about who they want to work with. You bring up a very good point, actually.
Yeah, and not even that. You all have to realize is do not, when you're talking to angel investors or VCs, obviously everyone here is looking for money. Do not ask for money. Always ask for advice and ask for what is the right time for me to fundraise in your view. Do you think am I ready now? Should I wait 3 more months? Or what are the things you would like to see for someone like you to invest in a company like this, right? When should I come back to you? So it's a give or take of building that relationship, building that trust. Because the people that you are the first investors, I'm not talking about the VCs, your friends and family, the angel investors, they're the biggest supporter of you guys, right? They're the ones who are really going to be there for you guys in the long run. And say, I have companies now, Series C, Series D, IR Labs. I could name you so many companies, and these companies will come back to us because, we're not in it for anything, right? We've already put our money in, and we don't do follow-on rounds. So we're not on board seats. We're not trying to compete. So sometimes entrepreneurs and people, it's a very lonely journey. So it's like, I just need to talk to somebody and really see, am I doing the right thing? What should I be thinking here? Should I take money from this investor, right? So these people that you're initially taking money with are going to be there for the long run.
I had another question that's sort of related to that. And I think I asked it, maybe I didn't ask it in the beginning, I don't remember. How do you know as a founder how much equity is appropriate to give to investors?
So this is a great question because I don't know, Charlie, what you did, but usually I tell people at seed stage or Series A, you could Google this. It's called a YC Safe Note. And I would tell everyone to raise money on a safe note. And safe notes, basically, I don't want to get into too much detail, but it's like a convertible note. It's like a loan, right? And I mean, technically it's not a loan, but I'm just simplifying it for right now. It's like, I will give you money, $500,000, whatever it is. And then in the future, we will convert it based on your milestones, right? And thank you for sharing that. That's really important. So it's like you can really understand safe notes, and safe notes are easy. In that website, it really tells you, you don't need lawyers, you don't need anything. You just need a valuation. What do you think the valuation or the company could be worth, which is like a valuation cap in a safe note, and then a discount. Do you want to give these investors like a 10% discount, 20% discount at the next round, right? Again, I don't want to complicate that, but point is, for the equity, if you go with a safe note with a valuation cap and a discount, it's very straightforward, right?
And Deepak, thanks for asking about that. Also, I have a little bit of a different take on it, and it's if I could sum it up very simply, it is that the valuation, which is really what you're talking about, it's valuation is equivalent to how much ownership you have and how much you're giving up to investors. I've kind of learned this, I think, over the years from like real hard experiences. It doesn't matter. Like it just it doesn't, it's something we think about a lot. Everybody talks about that around financings. And if you're doing it right, like it's not something to think about, because the market will tell you the right valuation. You should always think about it within range of what the market will bear. And it's true that even for seed stage, these safe notes almost always end up with a cap on them, which is functionally equivalent to valuation when it converts at the Series A. So there's a valuation on it at some level. And the biggest thing I would say is you want your valuation, which is the ownership that you're giving up, you want your valuation to be within some window of market standard. And the reason for that is just like very practically, unless you're like a huge outlier of a company, of which there are like maybe a couple of them a year in the world, you are inevitably going to end up within that window, or else you're just not going to raise money. So like the best way to think about it is, as long as you're within that window of market standard for any given round, like it's fine. It almost doesn't matter to think about it too much. What you should be thinking about is, how many investors am I reaching out to? Do I feel like I've really tested the market in terms of what's possible for this business? and how much feedback am I actually getting from the market. And then the market is going to tell you what your valuation is. And like you can look at comps, Wilson and Cooley especially publishes really good comps for typical valuation for a deal at a typical stage, and it's different for every stage. But like ultimately, as long as you're within range for that stage, that's where you're going to end no matter what. And they tend to be fairly narrow ranges. If you sit within the range, your deal is going to move a lot faster than if you try to push it outside the range. And inevitably, your investors are going to walk you back into that anyway. So like it almost doesn't matter. Like just look up the comps. You're going to end up within those comps, and that's kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah, Charlie, and I appreciate you just chiming in there. At that stage, sometimes the scientist doesn't know. They just don't know what the comps, what the numbers are looking for. So, rule of thumb could be for a biotech company, if you're raising $500,000, right? That would be 10% of the cap, so $5 million valuation, right? And I'm picking out numbers like that. So anytime you're fundraising, if you're raising $700,000, you could say, okay, a $7 million cap. And to Charlie's point, they'll work out. But one thing, I'm so glad you said this, Charlie, you'll have to talk to maybe 50 to 100, even more pitches, investors to raise that money, right? This is a full-time job of fundraising where you're going and talking. That's why people love Y Combinator Demo Day or Skydeck Demo Day or whatever demo day you can think about, is because a lot of investors come to that and you can pitch once and really get an audience, right? Because if you do it on your own, you'll have to get warm introductions, and that process is so long. It could take you 6 months, a year, just to talk to 100 different people. Think about that. And out of 100 different people, only maybe 4 or 5 or 6 might give you money. So in a way, it does become like a sales process, right? And that's when I tell this to scientist CEO, they're like, whoa, that's a lot of work. I am happy with my research. Maybe I will get a co-founder who can do this for me. Let me find somebody from business school that I can train and teach. They will go out and really pitch for me and help me, right, in the fundraising. And, I can tell you stories about that, how that worked out. But anyway, I'll stop right there.
And Lily, I would just say the other point I would add, which goes hand in hand with all these comments that Deepak and I just gave, is that I didn't mean to be dismissive about that, because obviously it matters to you. You're giving up your ownership, and it feels like you're giving cash out of an outcome. But the reality is, and people who've been through this before always appreciate this. You're going to make money if your investors make money, and if everything is lined up to build a business to scale. And if things are not lined up and it's not successful, no one's going to make money. And the valuation is not what determines whether or not everyone makes money. It's actually kind of fit for stage and fit with the right investor at every stage, and whether you planned out the business properly. But ultimately, if you raise money and if it's a success, you will make money, whatever the valuation is. If you don't raise money, if you push for a crazy valuation, you're not going to raise, right? And I mean, generally, like, a successful outcome is a success for everyone. People make money, and if you're not going to make money, then like the valuation doesn't matter anyway. So that's why I say I didn't want to dismiss it, but like it's almost beside the point. It's really a question of how you're raising, what's the business plan, what's the vision, and how are you going to get there, much more than the valuation.
So if you were to already have raised your seed round, for example, and then for whatever reason the science doesn't work out, how do founders pivot and then try and raise more money after that?
I have a few companies that are doing that right now, and it's so painful. Oh my God. We had one company that got at a seed round, incredible investor. We couldn't believe that they invested it. And next thing we know, in Series A, they're like, you're not doing what we thought you were doing. You guys have to pivot. It's doable. You just have to go back to your science and research and really try to figure out, okay, what am I really focused on? And can my technology be focused on something else within the body, right? Whether if you're doing kidney, could it be, going after liver or whatever it is. can I really pivot into something else that could be a bigger market, right? Or the same size market? It's not easy, but the investor base at that stage will kind of help you to do that.
Deepak,
I have
say
a little
more.
bit of a different take on it, if I could.
Sure, Charlie, go for it.
And I would say Deepak, different take than Deepak, and probably neither one of us is right. So you have to hear both perspectives and make your own call on it. But I would argue that you should expect to pivot. And that is what a startup company is in the early stages. And if you're pivoting at the right place in the life cycle of a company, then you're doing it right. If you're pivoting at the wrong place, then you have done it wrong. In other words, you planned wrong. But I would argue that a startup company is a constant pivot in the early days. And it's really, really important to plan for that. And I've learned lessons the hard way. And I've done it both ways, but certainly learned from failures, I would say. And what I mean by that is in the early stages of the company, and like the seed stage that Deepak is talking about, I tend to think of that as the discovery stage of a company, because you don't yet know what you're going to grow into. You just know that there's a vision of this is what we're going to achieve as a company. But you don't really know how you're going to get there, because that's kind of what a startup company is. You're figuring it out. And in the early days, you should always be running quick tests to the business with the least cash possible and the biggest impact possible out of your test, and very quickly testing different ideas on the smallest burn possible, so there's the least at risk. So that when you get to Series A and Series B, you've run all those tests earlier, and hopefully you've narrowed down your options, and you've still got options on the table. A few of them are kind of shots on goal, and hopefully one of them is going to work. But if you've planned it that way, then when you get to the Series A, it's not so much of a pivot. It's like this option versus this, and okay, we test it and then we go with this one. But then it doesn't feel like a pivot. And at the seed stage, the goal actually should be, maybe you don't call it a pivot, but experiment or test, or quickly figure out what the business is going to be, so that when you get to the Series A, there is going to be a pivot. And inevitably, every business I've ever been a part of puts product on market. You take a quick market test as much as you've invested in it, and you always have to redesign the product. And in some cases, you have to redesign your go-to-market and actually redesign the market that you're entering, which is a pivot. And you got to expect that, but you've got to build it in, because if you don't have the cash in the bank, if you haven't planned properly, and you're confronted with a pivot and you're reacting instead of anticipating, that's where everybody loses. That's where nobody makes any money, because then you have to raise again if you haven't counted on it. So it's a little bit of a different way of thinking, but I've learned to kind of plan ahead for knowing that it's going to pivot. And look, you're not necessarily going to message that to your investors, and you might not even be talking to the whole company about it. But expect it. That's just what it means to build a startup company.
No, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, everything Charlie said is spot on. And I think we define pivot differently, because most people at seed investors expect pivots the way Charlie's defining them. But it's like a platform play, right? We're going after different parts of the body with the same, same science concept going into different parts. But that doesn't mean a pivot. I mean, I'm talking about major pivots. But if you are comfortable with the right seed investors, they understand that. They know you're going to pivot, and they're going to do that, and they'll give you enough capital to pivot. But the point is, it's like if you're going to do a major pivot, what Charlie did speak about, where you're redoing the whole product and the business plan, that's such a major big pivot. That doesn't occur as often, right? Because in science, you have done a research for 5 years, 7 years as a postdoc, PhD, or whatever it is. You know your science. You're just trying to figure out what market your science is relevant. That's okay. But if you're like, well, whatever I did my 7 years and I have to change my science altogether, and I'm not going after, CRISPR technology, and I'm going after something else, that's the type of pivot I'm talking about. And I've seen that happen, and that's painful, right? Because you're like, wait, you're known for CRISPR. That's what you've done for 7 years. And now you're doing something else. But, it happens.
Deepak and Charlie, I think you brought up a good point about pivots. Maybe I can go more fundamental. How does a founder interact with the investor to speak about the pivots? Like, maybe Deepak, you can go first in terms of like what you've seen in terms of founders coming to you. How did you take it? How did you help? And probably things to avoid.
So there was a battery technology company that we had was actually growing. They were growing organic material to have a longer battery life, basically, right? And they were in the lab, they were experimenting. These guys know their materials, they know the science. That's what they've done their research in, right? And they've really worked at it, worked on it, and they didn't want to. So their premise was when they were starting the company, they want to go to existing manufacturers who are already building battery technology and implement just their organic technology as a process built in the manufacturing plant, right? So you're not going to go to China or wherever they're building these lithium batteries and say, let's change everything. I have a new technology. I'm going to do it. But if you come with this small process and say, hey, if you use our technology, it's going to increase your battery life by 30 or 40% using these organic materials, voila, that made sense. So that was our initial pitch that they gave us. And it made sense. We gave them $50,000 initially. We let them really test the battery technology, the organic materials. They tried different materials. Long story short, they've actually started working with a lot of different suppliers, including big, Toyota or whatever. And now they have pivoted to a point that they're like, Deepak, we should just start from scratch and build a whole manufacturing by ourselves because we can control the process, we know the material, and we could really revolutionize how battery technologies is being implemented into the cars. This was such a major pivot from what they've actually started because initially, as an investor, we're like, okay, they're not really disrupting everything. They're just going into Tesla or whatever you name it and say, we can help your manufacturing plant be better in terms of output, in terms of battery life. But now you're going to create a new battery and try to compete on a global scale. That's a pivot, my friend, at Series A, which is for us, it's like, okay, can be done, but they need a lot more capital. It's a different kind of even C team, right? Because the founder of the team is like, maybe I'm not going to run it as a CEO. Maybe I'll become a chief product officer or whatever and change that around. I mean, that part I'm making up. But the point is, the C-level folks have to change. The company has to grow as you're pivoting.
That's a nice outcome, but take an example of things where it did not work out. In terms of communicating and like how you wish it were different in terms of what the timing when they approached you or how they approached you.
So I have another company that is doing something in Latin America. And basically, he's helping power companies actually save on electricity by going to homes of, underdeveloped areas in the city and saying, let me buy you a refrigerator, let me buy you an air conditioner. They're more energy efficient. I will help the power companies save on electricity, and the power company, I will go back and make money from them, right? Great idea. It was actually selling like anything. A lot of governments, city governments, country governments were really excited about this. Even the WHO, we can go on and on. Everyone's excited. You know what his biggest issue was? Finding co-founders and finding a team. He just could not find people to really help him with that story, right? He went through 3 founders. He worked with them for 8 to 9 months, 10 months each. One he had for 2 years. So 2 he had 10 months, 1 he had for 2 years. At the end of the day, he shut the company down. He's like, it's a great idea, but if I don't have a team, I can't really pitch to investors at Series A. I've raised whatever on seed, but I just can't go on, right? So that outcome, is like, okay, it's a profitable idea. He could probably continue selling that into small power plants if he wanted and just keep it as a consulting business, but it's not going to be a venture business.
Cool. Charlie, how about you? Like, how were your interactions like? It looks like you've been through a few pivots. What the interactions with the investors look like, and any lessons for aspiring founders here?
Yeah, it's easier to draw these lessons before you start, like right now at the stage you're probably at, as opposed to applying them much later in the life cycle of the company. Because my biggest lesson is I like to be very transparent and upfront with my investors about expectations for what they will see from us at every stage of financing. Which is, again, just a story of being very upfront about the expectation that in the early stages, you're in discovery stage. The seed round is there to discover what the business will become. And you should expect that we don't know what it is now. By the end of the seed round, with use of funds, we will have a very specific plan for the Series A, but accept that we don't know what it is now. And along the way, we'll update you. You'll come along on the journey. We'll get input from you, but you've got to accept that we don't know what it is now. And it's a difficult thing, especially I would say for a first-time founder, but for anyone, it's a difficult conversation with an investor because you always feel like they're in position of power, and you should always just tell them, here's what we're doing, and if you don't do it, you got a big problem. So it's kind of hard to put yourself in that position, but if you do, you just end up with such a much better relationship with your investors. And I've learned to use that conversation as a screen for the right investor. And that's literally the conversation that tells me whether this investor is a fit for the business. Because again, fundraising is all about alignment and fit. There's so many investors out there, so many businesses that they can invest in. If you don't have exactly the right fit in terms of expected outcome and path to get there, and just the general worldview of how your business plays out, that will always come back and bite you in the end. And this is one of the best screens for who is the best fit. If your investor is coming in and telling you that, like, yeah, okay, I expect that you're going to call it a pivot or run experiments, figure out what the business looks like, that feels really comfortable to you. Whereas, for me, at least, if I have an investor, I let them know that here's the milestone I'm signed up for. It might change, it might not. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I'll bring you along for the ride. If I have an investor who comes back and says, like, no, this is the plan and you're going to hit it, that is the wrong investor for me. And I'd argue the wrong investor for the stage also. And again, these early investors are with you for better or worse for the life cycle of the company.
Yes.
It's really hard to get them off, and if you've got the right one, they can be really, really supportive the whole way through. So to me, this is the best screening question early on, because it tells you how an investor is going to think about a business when things go south after the Series B, which they definitely will, and it tells you how the investor is going to work with you at that stage.
That's a great advice, Charlie. Especially for the scientists, I think, if an experiment is failing, we don't feel comfortable talking to even our colleagues or the professors, and we just don't make it transparent. We hope there's fear. And I think when a decision is made out of fear, I just did a podcast recording who had to shut down the company, but she was telling about how she made a decision out of fear because the investors would think some way. But I think transparency and using that as a litmus to picking the investors is a great advice. Maybe Deepak, you're here. How do you encourage people with the transparency, right? Most people don't know what the hell they're doing in their life, I think, for any given thing, whether it is a scientist, an investor, a corporate CEO, Satya Nadella, I don't care. They're trying to figure out. They surround themselves with the right people. I don't think we communicate that properly. How do you encourage, like, maybe if there's one or two advice on that note?
Yeah, I think entrepreneurship is somebody really has to be determined and crazy to go after it, to be honest with you. And they have to have that vision that whatever they're going after, I mean, all of you on this Zoom call are passionate about your research. You guys are postdocs, PhDs, whatever stage you are, you're doing this research because you really believe in what you guys are, doing the research on. How do I take this research and can it have a bigger impact, right? Yes, you can get published in Nature or whatever, journal that you guys want to, aspire to. But other than publication, is there anything else I can do with the research? That's a question that all of you guys should be asking, right? If you're thinking about entrepreneurship. And that's where it gets fun. At least it gets fun for people, because I think it's like me, because I think it's really interesting to see how is this research really going to impact people in terms of their lives and what we can do out of that. So every time we come up with a technology, we are really trying to see that market, right? We're trying to see what's going on, and you guys have a better understanding of the market than we do, because we think we know, but at the end of the day, I think we're trying to build that relationship and trust with you. I will tell you, spot on, I don't know this. I don't know this technology. Teach me, because you guys are the expert. Teach me about the market. Those are the type of investors you want to deal with, because if they don't know, they should be comfortable telling you that right up front. Because you don't want an investor to say, yes, yes, I understand this. And then, 6 months from now, where is it? It can blow up, right? So that transparency and that trust begins on both sides. So that's again, when you do reference checks on those seed investors, you need to understand how honest are they? Do they really tell you what's on their mind? And those are the best investors, in my view.
Maybe that's a good segue to talk about picking investors, right? How do you pick good investors? Background checks are good. And you mentioned something about coachability. That's something you're looking at. I heard this from a lot of incubators and investors as well. How do you know that an investor is a good fit? Maybe Charlie, you can start out there. The reason I ask this is because, at least the scientific world, they try to, if an investor is across the board, they're trying to give you an advice, they think they know everything. And how do you test if that other person knows what you're working on, how that is a good fit?
So we talked about fit for stage, and that's always the most important thing. And I've seen that go the wrong way. If you have a later stage investor that's expecting you to run market tests and pivot, that's the wrong investor. If you have an early stage investor that's expecting you to just lock into a plan and run it, and if you don't succeed, they're out, that's the wrong investor. And that's true for any kind of business. It's you want the right fit for your stage of the company. And again, you can screen against that by making sure they're asking you the right questions. The other piece that I've learned that we practice very routinely at RubyBio, we've done this since the beginning at every stage of fundraising, is to think about how they're diligencing the business. And this is a really nice signal into how they think about the business in terms of how they're going to get their return, but also how they're going to work with you as you're building the company together with them. And what I mean by that is again, like very similar to the fit for stage kind of conversation. I have seen investors who were writing a $250,000 check into a 5 million seed round do just endless diligence and just day after day ask for deeper questions, ask you for a profit and loss projection within endless precision, ask you for endless depth around what your technology looks like at scale, what's your gross margin, what's your unit economics, which they should ask, but you shouldn't have the answers at the early stage. So they should ask you to test your thinking and make sure you're kind of thinking the right way about how you're going to get from here to there. But they can't demand that, because there literally are no answers at that early stage of the business. It's more a question of how you think about it. On the opposite side, I've seen investors who very appropriately buy into vision and team and market and just the capability of team to execute together. And in the early stages, like that's what an investor should diligence, because there is literally nothing else to diligence about your business because the business doesn't exist yet. And we use this to screen through investors very routinely. We'll go into an intro call with an investor, and if they're immediately diving in on unit economics and driving down to how we're going to get to scale from here to there, at like full scale is $100 million business, that's the wrong investor. And you can tell immediately when you're sitting across the table from someone who's more of a relationship investor, who wants to understand you at a personal level, and understand how you got to the business and what drives you personally, why you're behind this vision. And you get those kinds of questions about what it means to work with them as a human being. That's the right fit for stage. That's the right type of investor for an early stage. And that's how we screen through. And I mean, you can tell right away if they're digging into the business in the right way for the stage, or if they're just like asking meaningless questions just to ask questions, which we see all the time, or if they're literally trying to diligence a Series D business at seed stage.
You're nodding your head, Deepak.
Yeah, Charlie was spot on. I think I was the latter of that. Relationships are key for me on a personal level. But one thing, I'm going to change the question, and I'm going to say, how do we really diligence the entrepreneur, right? Everything that Charlie said, it's true about diligencing the VC, but we actually used to give our entrepreneurs homework. And we would say, here's a weekend. I want you to go back and I want you to create 3 slides on just technical and a business model, just 3 slides, and that's it. But I want the technical person to present the technical side. And if they have a co-founder, usually we had a team. We never invested in a single person. The team, the other person present the business side. And we would love to see their interactions when they're presenting, right? So we periodically, for every single team, I mean, that's one example, we gave different kind of homeworks to every single team. And again, we weren't the science expert. So we would call in, somebody else to help with the science and the technology to make sure we understand it. Is this viable? Is it big enough market and things like that? But end of the day, we're testing how well the team works together, even at that initial stage, at the front of, and that's part of Charlie, what he said. How do we go about diligencing? Because yeah, you could talk about, market, the projections, and at that stage, you don't know anything. You shouldn't be telling me in 5 years it's going to be $100 million business. You don't know right now, right? You're still at seed stage. So it's really trying to understand that team, that execution, and the market size, right? And can I trust this team to really build something in the next 18 months? That's what we're investing in.
You've given me a glimpse into the inner workings of a partnership, Deepak. Thank you for that. The one other comment I would say very tactically around diligencing your investor, and I think we touched on this a little bit earlier, is talk to their portfolio. And this is always the best way to reach an investor is through one of the founders that they have invested in. So like if you've made the right connection, then you've already got portfolio to talk to. But above all, reach the founders that they have invested in and get their read. And I mean, I'll tell you, just like even if it's just a quick thumbs up or thumbs down on a text message, that matters. People will really be very open about the investors they work on with. I'm sorry to say, Deepak, but we talk to each other. And that is the very best feedback you're ever going to get about an investor. You must talk to their portfolio. And again, we do that routinely. If I can't reach the portfolio of an investor, which happens once in a while, I actually won't take a check. And you can ask them to connect with portfolio. That's a very legitimate diligence question from you to them. And if they're a world-class investor, they absolutely will connect you to a few of their founders. And honestly, like I've actually connected with founders of a portfolio that they've connected me to, that they're actively invested in, who give me inside information that's not always so positive about the investor. So talk to their portfolio. It's the very best insight you can get.
Just to add to that, Facebook, YC has a internal whatever you want to call it, a database, and it's called Bookface, where they actually rate every single investor, and they rate from people who have dealt with them every single batch, right? So if you're thinking about fundraising and you're going through that and you know somebody in YC, or you can get a handle of that, you can also ask one of these YC founders just to share some insight on that investor. What are other people are thinking? Because it's easy to talk to portfolio companies that I've invested in, but you should also talk to the people that I have not invested in and what they're saying about me, because they're like, it goes both ways. And that's what I think Bookface or whatever YC has that, because they'll say this guy was a total idiot. He set up a meeting and then he asked me dumb questions, and then in 10 minutes he said, I'm not interested. It's like, why did you even take the meeting if you're only going to give me 10 minutes, right? And just so you want to hear the companies that I didn't invest in as well give you references, right? Because at the end of the day, it's our reputation with everybody, whether we invest or not. How do we deal with people? Having said that, I know we're talking about investments, and Charlie and I are going into one end with, the host over here. But I do want to come back to you guys, because you guys might be at such a stage that this all sounds Greek to you. You're like, yes, fundraising and numbers and investors. Deepak, I'm not even there right now. I'm just trying to figure out, in my research, what should I be doing at this point? Should I think about business? Should I think about anything? So I'm going to go back to you guys and figure out, where are you guys mentally? Like, you're here talking about, fundraising, but what do you guys want to hear? Anybody?
I have a question. Yeah, like for me, I currently don't have a co-founder. Then, like, how do you go about that to find co-founders with like a complementary skill? Like for me, I'm very scientifically driven, but I'm not a great presenter or speaker, and that may actually be a disadvantage in terms of like raising funds. And I'm not co-founding with people that I worked with previously or currently in the lab. Then how should I go about it? Like this is I'm not exactly a people's person. If I am, I probably would be a different profession. And so is there any advice that you can give?
One very specific comment is to get to know the business school, because there are MBA students, and especially executive MBA students, who are out there looking for you. And they're thinking the same way. I know how to build a business. I've done this before. But there are a lot of people out there who are very good at execution and light on ideas. And I would put myself in that category. Go find the one who matches you, because they're out there.
Yeah, I just want to add, there is something at Berkeley, at begin.berkeley.edu. There are two websites. One is called BearX, and Naresh, maybe you can share that. That's a platform where people are looking for co-founders within the university, and you can use that. The other one, which is free for all of you guys, it's called startupschool.org. This is by Y Combinator. Then YC is really trying to figure out co-founders and matching co-founders. And the way they do it is the startupschool.org is basically a website with 7 or 8 lectures, or maybe 9, I don't know the number of lectures, but basically you can see it on your own time, right? But you're part of the Slack channel where you can find like-minded people and try to say, hey, with Slack, instead of eventually you'll have to meet them. But initially it's like, I'm working on this and I'm looking for business folks, or I'm looking for somebody who can code, or whatever you're looking for. I think Startup School does a great job in trying to match people and try to figure out, what personalities are there. But within Berkeley, there's another one in that website, which is part of the SET, if I'm not mistaken. And that's part of, I'll come back to you. I'll Google the website right now and I'll put it on chat. But that's another good one within the Berkeley ecosystem to find co-founders.
Thank you.
And like Charlie said, of course, business school. By the way, I teach at the business school. I should say the business school. So if you need people, you can always email me, and I'll throw my email up there. But it would be great if you say, hey, I need so and so, and there's happy hours, or there's even just informal coffee chats and meeting. You guys can meet people.
I think SET is actually partnering with Y Combinator to help find co-founders. I put the link there. I should look it up. And one piece of advice is, like, we scientists just get stuck in the lab. get out and just talk to other people in other departments, humanities, engineering. Just be curious to learn about them. I think you'll build a lot of friendships. This is Berkeley, and we don't use it to the full extent.
That, and find people also who have done companies, maybe not in your lab, but an adjacent lab or in your building. You know, chemistry department's incredible in terms of how many companies they have spun out. The engineering school has spun out many companies. Find labs within your building that has entrepreneurs, that have people who have started companies. They're your best references. If you don't know where to go to Sarja Center, this fourth floor. I think the Berkeley AI research is on the fourth floor or fifth floor. But right below that, there's an open space where entrepreneurs are just sitting, and go talk to people and say, hey, what's your research? What are you working on? Right.
And here's a shameless plug-in from my podcast, Lab to Startup. We talk about stories, about the early stage, the transition, right? How people have done this. The Caribou Biosciences, people have transitioned. Jennifer Doudna's lab, we have a lot of stories, a lot to learn from there. Any more questions?
Yeah, I need to step out. I'm running a little bit late, but I just want to say that at the end of the day, don't let entrepreneurship kind of scare you, because it is an incredible journey. The best thing you guys can do is really find the right people to work with to help you in that journey. That's my only advice to all of you. If you can find the people that can help you to build a company, that's more even important than any investor or whatever you're talking to. Because if you find the right people, you'll figure out the way to raise money and kind of go from there.
Thank you, Deepak. Thank you for taking the time.
All right. Thank you. Charlie, all yours, man.
Thanks, Deepak. Nice to see you.
Bye-bye.
All right, we have Charlie. I think one question Fuhar asked earlier was like, how is the funding situation right now? I think Charlie, you're in the midst of it. How are these fundraisings going on? Any advice?
What I'm finding is it's very stage specific. And, I've kind of seen this because I raised recently, a few years back, I raised a large financing at Mission Bio, which was growth stage, much later stage, fully operating business. And then very recently, I've raised a couple different rounds for Ruby Bio, which is, early seed stage. And what I've found is that later stage investing has dried up. Very, very difficult. And that is largely because, it's kind of the nature of the market. It's because these investors actually can invest in different places. A lot of them are crossover funds that can pick between private and public companies. And, they can pick the businesses that give them the returns in the near term. Early stage investing, I have found, is actually much easier than when I started at the early stages of Mission Bio almost a decade ago. It's again kind of back to this comment of fit for stage. At the early stage, investors are investing in people. They're investing in you and your idea and your vision for the market. And there's really like nothing else at that point for them to invest in. And it's really easy for them to find businesses like really high performing businesses like the ones that you guys are about to build, and invest in them at that stage and expect that in 3 to 5 to 10 years they will be able to get it to the next stage and see the return once they're past this economic cycle. So I've actually found it's not that difficult at the very early stages, and I've actually found it's even easier than it was quite a while ago. And later stages, you have to have a real full-scale operating business with all the right proof points on the market. But I think in general, you guys are kind of ahead of that. And by the time the market turns, that story probably will have changed. I've also found that in the last several years or so, we've seen, especially in climate tech, where I'm playing right now, but a lot of these climate tech funds cross over into biotech and life sciences. I found there's a ton of these newer funds that have popped up over the last 5 years or so. A lot of them come from corporate venturing. So there's some like corporate venture money behind the company with maybe, a couple partners that put in their own money. But there's there's a lot of cash flowing around the ecosystem in the very early stages. So I mean, as you're just getting off the ground, I think it's actually a pretty good environment to be raising in.
That is very encouraging. For everybody here, Charlie has been a good friend of BPEP for a very long time, a successful founder, has lots of insights, and I'm going to put you out there, Charlie. Like, is it okay for people to approach you or contact you if they need some advice?
Yeah, I would be delighted to connect. So I'm absolutely, and Naresh, you can put my contact out there, but I'm delighted to chat if it would be helpful. And Naresh, I was remembering as we were just getting into this, you and I met, I think, I think it was just about 12 or 13 years ago. It was right around when you were getting BPEP off the ground. And I think I met you very early on. And I remember the very first conversation we had was how impressed I was that that BPEP was actually starting, because I've always felt, and I still feel this, but I think you're starting to correct this now. I've always felt that higher academia, the PhDs and postdocs that you guys are coming from, is just a perfect breeding ground for building the right businesses that the world needs. And that so many of us, I mean, I started in a PhD program myself. I ended up jumping out with a master's because I got bored of it, and I have so much respect for how far you guys have gone. But there's so much of higher education is oriented toward academics and basic research, and you do your undergrad and your PhD, and you go out for a postdoc and professor, and it's like that's the linear track that is expected as you enter. And there just isn't a lot of understanding of like what you guys are now doing and thinking about what you could actually do to commercialize your effort and use that to make the world a better place beyond just basic research. I've always thought there's a gap there in higher academia, and I've always felt that BPEP serves a very, very important gap. So I feel like I want to say congratulations to all of you guys for thinking about a different approach to impact for the world based on the science that you've done. One other thing I would say, though, is I've seen a lot of companies get off the ground, coming out of a PhD thesis or some of the work you've done as a postdoc. And, a lot of them do well, and a lot of them don't do well. I mean, I've seen so many of them, pick up a quick seed check and then go out of business as you actually need to create a business out of it. And the biggest lesson learned, I mean, from companies that I've advised and just like having seen this from your stage before, the biggest lesson I've learned is you always have to start from a market and a vision. And you have to have a vision for how you're going to either change a market or build or replace a market, and why the business that you're building is just so impactful for the world that your customers are going to need to buy it. And you always have to have that vision. If you have, a science project that you've locked into, and you're trying to create a vision out of that, or force it into a vision, or force it into a market, you should be honest with yourself about like whether you got the tail wagging the dog, and you're trying to create a business out of science that might prefer to be research as opposed to commercial. And what I would tell you is you're still doing absolutely the right thing here. I still absolutely congratulate you for being a part of this and thinking about how to commercialize it. But potentially, rather than commercializing the very first thing that you're working on and where you feel like you're passionate about the science, accept that this is a long game, right? And accept that you may be fit for building a market, but with all intellectual honesty, maybe this is not the market, and maybe you want to jump into another postdoc now that you've learned what it is, and do exactly the science that the market needs. Or maybe you want to raise a little bit of government funding to get a company off the ground in a different market that is exactly the market that the world needs. So it's just a comment to be very intellectually honest with yourself about the commercial potential of your science. And it's not a bad story. Like if your science is not actually exactly the right thing for the market, like that's okay. You know how to do the science and you can do it on the next one.
Thank you for that note, Charlie. Science project versus business. I think everyone on the group in the meeting here is like a scientist, and we tend to get sucked into the science part of it because we love it so much. how do we just like check or be intellectually truthful about the path, about if something is a real business or not? Like any advice on that? That needs to happen. We love our science. Like that is the whole reason we are here. And even we tend to do that at a startup too. And I think that the path to market, to profitability or building a product, any advice on that front?
You got to talk to the market. Just do not be shy about talking to the market constantly. I mean, in the early days, as you're thinking about a company, and in the later stages, even after you built a full-scale business, you always have to be talking to the market. And even in the early days, I'd say especially in the early days, when like it's just basic science and you can't quite picture which patient this is going to go into. Maybe you've got like a drug that doesn't have the delivery vehicle, and you can't quite picture the right payload to, the right carrier for your payload. Always be thinking about who is going to pay you how many dollars for the product. Even if it feels way too early and like you're just kind of, somewhere out there may or may not be a product for this, but it's really important science, I would still get out there and talk to customers. And if you don't have customers for it, then like be intellectually honest with yourself about that. Maybe you need to dig harder for the customers, or maybe there's a different segment for you to tackle. But always listen to the market and be honest with yourself about what the market is telling you.
Any questions for Charlie? I feel it's like a precious time for me because we have Charlie on the microphone. I can't just let him go. One other thing I wanted to bring up was around the fundraising part of it. Like when you're trying to put numbers together on fundraising, like you need to pay yourself. I think that is something scientists like don't really know, because you get paid like $30,000-$40,000 as a postdoc, and you just get sucked into that we got to burn less. Any advice on like putting a figure on the salary for yourself on the team, especially because you're living in the fucking Bay Area, which is expensive, pardon my French, but I think give a reality check of like, how do you survive? How do you put numbers and convince yourself like it is okay to pay a salary?
You should pay yourself a salary. As soon as you have money in the company, the first thing you should do is pay yourself a salary. You should not starve once you've raised money for the company. If you haven't raised, that's a different story. And then you consider yourself the investor in the company because you're doing it for free and you are literally investing in the company. But you got to pay yourself. I'll just give you numbers. Like if you're starting out, if you're grant funded, maybe early stage seed funded, I mean, a CEO, one of the founding team of the company, I mean, you should be making 150,000 or so, which is like typical, science level for, for someone who's been out of grad school for a little bit. If you are Series A stage, again, CEO, founder, leading the company, you should be making 200 to 220 to, maybe pair up or down from that. And if you have an investor telling you that you're at the wrong stage, you got the wrong investor, because these are just heuristics across the market. You should be paying yourself, and you should be paying yourself market standard. I do not believe in founders starving themselves on behalf of the company. And with the right investor, they don't want that either, because they want you putting every shred of focus into the company, and not having to make the wrong trade-offs with your personal life.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very important lesson. Like I feel so many people are shy or just like scared of like putting a number of earning a living wage. It should not. Any other topics that we didn't discuss about fundraising aspect of it, Charlie, that comes up in all the startups that you see? I know you advise a bunch of them, that mistakes to avoid.
To other, I realize a lot of you guys are in life sciences and biotech, or some field that touches on that. And one other thing to think about as we think about this conversation of pivoting and like what's it going to look like down the line if I need to change what the business looks like. I think there are kind of two ways to think about a market, and how you build a business into it. One is to start with the market, right? And figure out what is the very best market I can build, and then what's the very best technology that the market needs that I can deliver. And that's kind of the way I've done it at Ruby Bio this last time around. We started with market and then built the best product for it. But another way to do it is, and this happens a lot with life sciences, is a platform, right? And again, like you have to do the right market discovery work and hear from customers that ultimately this platform will create a product that they'll part with cash for. But when you have a platform, it actually gives you room to pivot. And that's very often the right way to think about a biotech or any kind of life sciences business, because they very often are platforms. And you will find as you're building this, especially with any kind of biotech, you will find that you can always build a business model as a therapeutic. You can often spin that around and turn it into a diagnostic, because typically these biological mechanisms of action can be flipped back and forth. And you can often build a quick business in research tools if you have something that enables others to build their business. And those are three different business models that are often like the commercial platform potential out of a startup company. And in the early days, if you don't know exactly which technology is going to serve the market, or if you have a market and you don't exactly know the right configuration for it, if you have a platform, it leaves those options open to be able to pivot when the time is right, instead of making decisions early on that you just shouldn't even be making because you don't have the information to feed it. At Mission Bio, for example, when in the early days of the company, when I was thinking about whether to build in with Mission Bio or a bunch of other opportunities, similar university spinouts that I was looking at, we didn't have the market lined up. We knew directionally that it was probably going to be a diagnostic, but there was a nice path to research tools along the way. And we knew we could spin that into a therapeutics platform also if we wanted to. But we also knew, again, like the market dynamic was telling us that single cell genomics was just taking off. And we knew intuitively that single cell gives you better precision than bulk sequencing, which is just like a big problem statement behind a lot of markets. And we knew that this platform had legs in so many different directions. And then in our case, like that was enough to invest in the platform because we knew it was going to go somewhere. And we had the team that was ready to build it in any different direction. And then at that point, the pivot, if that's what you call it, was like, okay, we had the basic technology developed, but do you build it into a qPCR tool, or do you build it into a single cell sequencing tool, or do you run clinical diagnostics on it? And all of those options were open as a platform. And then even down the line, as we started launching the platform, the product itself was a platform which had different assays you could run. So then the pivot was like, okay, we have the platform, we launched the first assay, now what's the next one? And the first one didn't take, so jump over to the next one. That's the pivot. But the more you have those options open, the more likely you're going to get to scale. So it's another way of thinking about a business, like at the stage that you guys are in, where it's basic science. Even if you don't have the market fully defined, that type of platform that can serve a lot of different end markets and a lot of different applications, that itself might be enough to build on if you have confidence that one of these end markets might deliver.
That's a great point. That's a great point. And we're coming to the end of the show, top of the hour. Any last parting questions? If not, I just pasted something.
I just left my email in the chat. It's
Awesome.
silver@RubyBio, and you're welcome to reach out anytime.
There was an interview with the CEO of NVIDIA at a multi-billion-dollar company, and they asked him, like, if you had to become 30-year-old again, go back, would you do NVIDIA again? He said, absolutely fucking no. Because instead of the company being a multi-billion-dollar company, it's a hard journey. And the good thing about entrepreneurs is that they wake up and they're like, oh, how hard can it be? Right? And I think these founders, these entrepreneurs have this unique DNA, which keeps telling them, how hard can it be? It's going to be fucking hard. Nobody's going to lie to you, but only you guys can do that. And we wouldn't have an mRNA vaccine for COVID if the scientists didn't think about it that way. And one message we give at BPEP is like, if not you, who will care for your research? You did years of research. If you cannot take it to the market, it'll just die in a publication. By no means it's going to be an easy path. You might be failing. A lot of us fail, but I think when you walk out on the other side, you'll have learned so much in your life. That's like, a job at a 9-to-5 job wouldn't teach you those things. Another postdoc will definitely not teach you that. So good luck with everybody with the startup journeys. Thank you so much, Charlie. And BPEP team, this wouldn't have happened without all the efforts, especially Marjan and Sarvesh. They picked up all the heavyweight this time around. Thank you so much.
I would
Thanks
like
so much, everybody. It's so nice to see the BPAP team. Thank you.